Good evening. I'd now like to convene the meeting of the Evanston Administration Public Works of January 23rd.
Leslie McMillan.
Sorry.
Leslie McMillan.
And Mr. Stonebeck, if you could please take roll.
Councilmember Burns,
Here.
Councilmember Reed,
Here.
Councilmember Kelly,
Here.
Councilmember Harris,
Present.
Councilmember Newsome.
Here.
You have a quorum, ma'am.
Great, we have, we'll start with the minutes. Would somebody like to move the minutes?
Move approval.
All in favor?
Aye.
No objections? Okay, the minutes are approved.
Other than I don't actually see the minutes on the agenda.
Okay, so
There are
I'm
no
gonna,
minutes.
so we'll withdraw that. So we have not approved
So
any
the
minutes.
former
There
vote
are
was
no-
invalid.
Okay, so we're canceling that. So,
Well, I guess then the question, is there an explanation for the public why there aren't minutes?
Due to staffing shortages and the length of the last meeting, it was taking longer than we anticipated to prepare the minutes.
Thank you very much.
okay, we'll now move to public comment, and we'll begin with in-person public comment, starting with Mr. Charles Smith.
Hello, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. If you could speak closely to the mic.
Thank you, I will. One of the items tonight on the agenda is the lease for Jens Jensen Gardens in Evanston, and that would be a direct lease with the organization for the grounds and coach house at Harley Clark. Why does Jens Jensen want and need a lease? We have many donors and many volunteers who have worked down there and have contributed to the plants and trees we have planted, and we think of those donors as investors. And investors expect a return on their investment. I think the return that our investors are looking for is a refurbished Jens Jensen landscape, a beautiful landscape and park to be enjoyed by the community, and a coach house that provides programs that promote the interests of this community in the environment. In order to accomplish those things, they take a lot of time, they take a lot of money. The kind of landscape that we envision will require a landscape architect that will work with both the plant material and the structural part of the landscape, and a architect to work on the building to make sure that it's everything that we want and need it to be. Those things take investment of money. They also take investment of time from the neighborhood and other interested people into helping us to determine what the final product will be. So those things take a lot of time. And then landscape is one of those things. It's not like a building. You don't build a landscape and then look back and walk away and go, wow, that's nice. A landscape is very dynamic and takes a long time to evolve. It's obvious that the trees we plant down there will be baby trees when I'm gone. And so we have a visual dream, an imaginary dream in our heads of what it will be at some point in the future. But the implementation of a landscape requires, digging the dirt, planting gardens and trees that will all kind of be in various stages of maturity over a period of time. So all we ask is that you help us to not disappoint our investors. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, Bill Brown.
Good evening, council members. My name is Bill Brown. I currently serve as the Vice President of Jens Jensen Gardens in Evanston. I speak to you now to encourage you to approve the initiation of a lease between the city and Jens Jensen Gardens in Evanston for the coach house and grounds at Harley Clark property. First, I'd like to clarify that the mansion and coach house have functioned independently for decades and surely can do so going forward. In addition, the most recent leasee of the property specifically named Jens Jensen Gardens in Evanston as a partner to restore the coach house and gardens, which we have begun to do. We strongly believe that the mansion will serve many community-focused functions well and could make use of the grounds when desired with full cooperation from Jens Jensen Gardens in Evanston. JJGE's work will make the surrounding of the mansion more attractive, as well as creating a landscape site of historical significance as an exemplar of Jens Jensen's work. JJGE will relieve a new mansion tenant of the burden of raising several $1 million for the coach house and grounds, and at the same time, attract a unique cohort of donors and supporters who might not have the same interest in the renovation of the mansion. A partnership between JJGE and another party will increase the likelihood of successful outcome for this completely unique Evanston treasure. Lease negotiations are already underway and can be successfully completed with direction from you all. Please do the right thing. Approve the action proposed. Vote yes for JJGE's lease. It will help us to produce the best result for the site, for the people of Evanston, and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Mike Vasilko.
Thank you very much. So I was glad to see item D1 was on the agenda tonight for the animal shelter update, but I expected more in the way of a packet information. There was really nothing new other than some new dates about the bid, and bids are due tomorrow, and staff will come back on the 13th. But what was missing, what I thought was going to be there, was a complete summary of all the costs that have been spent to date. You know, AE fees, what's the total, what's the estimate, the last estimate that the consultants put together for the city. I saw one back in 9/6/22 for $7.5 million, but I think that was going to be reduced. So what was their latest estimate? I'd like to know that. The county grant, you know, I understood there was supposed to be an extension to the county grant documentation so that we didn't lose the grant money. So I'm hoping that was taken care of. I'd like to know more about the fundraising, since everybody's having trouble with their fundraising. EASA, I'd like to know how much money they've actually gathered. I've asked before, I guess I'd like to know what has the city council formally voted on in the way of a total cost for this project, because I think there's a lot of things that didn't get blended into that budget number. So I'd like to know what the total that the city council has formally voted on for this project, including temporary shelter fees for dogs and cats, and the financing that's going to cost to borrow the money, what the contingencies are, and also the solar panel system I keep hearing about, and maybe Councilmember Nwisma can explain what that is and what it's going to be, because I looked at the documents that were on the bid and proposals website. There are thousands and thousands of specifications and lots of drawings, the appearance of it being very thorough, but I didn't see anything related to solar panels or provisions for solar panels or how that system is going to work. So I'm confused by that. You know, the fixtures, the furniture, any other loose equipment that's supposed to be blended into this budget. So just a total summary of costs is what I was looking for. And then I understand the solar panel system is a third-party system, Who are those people? Have they been hired? What's going to be on the building? How does that benefit the city? What are we paying for that in monthly fees?
I think it's start to wrap up. Thank you.
Right. So that's what I'm looking for. Item D2, I just encourage you not to do anything that deters people from using electric vehicles. Penalize those who are misusing those chargers, but not the others. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, next, Sharon Fagan?
Hi, I'm Sharon Fagan, longtime Evanston resident, and I'm here to speak in favor of the Jens Jensen garden lease. The garden group is thoughtful, organized, has a good plan, has been working toward revitalizing the land around Harley Clark Mansion for several years now. There's a prospectus that's been written that lays out the vision. There's a plan for the repairs needed for the coach house, which are not actually very extensive. Overall, it's in good shape. A survey's been done. Historians who specialize in Jens Jensen have been consulted. Past groundskeepers of the site have been thoroughly interviewed and engaged. There are photos of the original landscape. There's the original plan. And there's a draft lease that is modeled on other leases in effect in Evanston for other grounds. And so everything is really ready to go. There's strong relationships with community institutions, with the schools, with the Environmental Association, and others to get classes and training programs underway. And as has been mentioned, there are a lot of interested donors. We believe we can raise all the funds needed to get the project underway this summer if we have a signed lease soon. And this will save money for the city of Evanston and at the same time beautify the area. Jens Jensen was the primary landscape architect of many public parks and has an international reputation. And it's kind of remarkable that he was involved here in Evanston in this corner of the city. So while I know the tendency of some of you is to put everything on hold because the Harley Clark Mansion's no longer going to be the Book Arts project, I'm here to say think about the garden and getting it underway as staging. You know, when you sell a house these days, you have to stage it first and make it look good so that it's appealing. And the Jens Jensen Garden will do that. It'll help bring in a worthy tenant for the Harley Clark Mansion. If the grounds are appealing, if the community is engaged there, it'll just make it more appealing. And Jens Jensen Gardens understands that there needs to be flexibility, that the project, there's going to be a new project. And of course, they'll need easy access to the building. There may be a cafe and terrace, all these different things that we've been talking about for a long time. Plants can be moved.
Thank you.
But yeah, we just want to move this forward, and we pledge to help with finding a worthy tenant and to partner with them. So thank you.
Thank you. Next is Tim Guimonte.
I think this is on the agenda tonight. It's the Northwestern proposed stadium and a study of it. I was a research economist during my career. I'm retired. I had a degree from University of Chicago, and I've got 2 degrees from Northwestern, so I'm not an enemy of Northwestern at all. The City of Evanston and Alderman Revelle have proposed doing an independent economic impact study of Northwestern's proposal. I'm concerned about this because I did a lot of economic impact studies during my career, and there's elements of it that don't appear to be in the study that Northwestern did. And by the way, Northwestern won't release their study and their methodology, their data, underlying data, They say it's proprietary, but this is a public forum, and this is a public issue, and the city of Evanston should get that study, and I would like to look at it. I spoke to two preeminent sports economists today, University of Chicago and Lake Forest College, and both of them said this is very concerning because these kinds of studies that Northwestern did are puffery. They are not done correctly. For example, they use multiplier analysis incorrectly. They use assumptions which we don't know. We don't know their assumptions. If Evanston is going to do a study, they need to critique Northwestern's study. They need to review or at least be aware of the vast sports economics literature on this topic, on the topic of mega events or stadiums in cities. And the consensus of that literature is it's either a negative to a city or it's actually could be zero or very tiny. It is not the big numbers that Northwestern put out there. I just want to read one quote from one of the studies. Professor Bod, who is at Lake Forest College, I spoke to him today. New stadiums, arenas, and franchises, as well as mega events, appear to be as likely to reduce taxable sales as increase them. In other words, they could reduce tax revenue in Evanston over the years. And so that's why it's an alarming thing. It's not a hard thing to look at Northwestern's study unless they keep it secret. And if they do, the city of Evanston hasn't done their due diligence to allow something like a zoning, whatever it's called, change or variance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Next, Roy Friedman. I'm so sorry. I'm really, Ray Friedman.
Okay. It's okay either way. Who's Roy? That's Rogers. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. So I'd like to address, again, concerns about the budget. Going from 293 million, can you hear me? To 360 million last year, to almost 400 million this year. Last city council meeting 2 weeks ago, Mike Vasilko sent me an email of probably a dozen questions on the budget. The only answer that I remember hearing was that the amount that was mentioned was not during the holidays. But all the rest of the questions that he asked, I don't believe were answered. So we need answers to our public comment questions. So maybe we can have a person that you're hiring just to address public comments, because I've been talking about this for 4 or 5 years now, and we don't have any response to public comment. And it's just, you know, are we spinning our wheels? Are we wasting our time coming up here and speaking, you know, every other week and talking about our concerns? They need to be addressed. $1.1 million you have on the budget for Robert Crown. Why are we spending $1.1 million for Robert Crown? It says construction. I thought construction was over. I was told they need to replace windows for, I don't know, $50,000. Why are we spending money on Robert Crown after we just spent $50 million on it? It's in the budget. It's in the budget, $1.1 million. So how much does it actually cost to keep Robert Crown open? How much are we spending on repairs, on employees, on you know, the maintenance, the utilities? You know, we're spending millions of dollars like they're $100 bills, and I don't see how this is sustainable for us. So we need to have a plan. I know you come up with a plan at the beginning of the year, but does the budget, that $400 million, close to it, is that what our income is going to support? Because we're borrowing money every single year I mean, seems like every other month, we have new general obligation bonds. Our general obligation bonds went up from 100 million to 200 million.
Thank you, Mr. Friedman.
That's it. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.
And then public comment through Zoom, Brian Bencheras. Rapid chairs.
Yes, I'm Brian Bacharis, and thank you very much. And good evening to the members of the Administration and Public Works Committee. I'm coming again as a concerned citizen. I'm very concerned about the additional and rising costs of some of the projects here. And recently, the renovation or replacement of the animal shelter at $6.3 million. I've commented before, and like some of the people who are commenting before me tonight about the unsustainability of these very expensive projects. And what occurs to me is that we're now adding $717,000 for phase one to renovate or repair the what was formerly the recycling center is now the municipal storage facility. And on top of that, we have sold a property in downtown Evanston on Central Street, formerly a public library, and I thought that money would be earmarked for another public library in a ward that was more in the fifth ward, somewhere where we can give people more opportunity to attend, use a library facility. And then we're going to have another additional $163,000 in obligation bonds on top of that. What's the debt service on that? And I looked at some of the documentation that was included in tonight's package, and it seems like there's a very sketchy on and the details of these repairs and the process for this project. The residents of this community and the taxpayers demand more transparency and a more responsible use of the taxpayers' money. People are leaving our community because of the rising cost of living in our fair city. One of the couple things that jumped out at me at some of the materials that I reviewed this morning is that replacing the roofs at the recycling center, much of that is metal roof, and that's a lifetime situation. I couldn't see any places that it was failing. There are some flat roofs, and I look at these things and consider how much does it cost per square foot. Does anybody have any idea what we're paying, the community is paying per square foot for these renovations? And if you look at these monies, when you consider the engineering and the other planning part of this, at $717,000, if that at $150 an hour for professional to undertake these things, that's 4,783 hours at $150 an hour divided by 40 hours. That's 119 weeks, or one person working for 2 years, very hard for this community at a very high pay scale. And my understanding is that they're refurbishing the what will be the storage facility to first accommodate the animal shelter. Why wasn't this the actual plan for the animal shelter? Instead of spending $6 or $7 million or nearly $800 per square foot, why aren't we renovating that to be used entirely as the animal shelter and building another facility that won't require the same kind of amenities or HVAC and other components?
Thank you, Mr. Vicaris.
One could build a pole barn for, a quarter of the money that they're asking for
Thank
this
you.
project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Tricia Conley.
Good evening. I have a couple of things. I'll start with A9, which is the approval of the proposed lease for Jens Jensen Gardens Group. I encourage council members to approve this lease. You have before you a group of people that have been committed for over 4 years. And we should be feeling very, very lucky and excited that they have stuck with it through thick and thin, through upheaval, through that last AP&W meeting that went on, and it was really out of sorts. Let's get this done. This is a win for the community. Let's have something that we can say, hey, you know, it's happening. And as other speakers said, you know, this speaks to people that have had a financial interest in this, people who have gone to volunteer to help this. Let's make that happen tonight. The other thing that I am really concerned about, and the look of it, is A8, the approval of the contract with Hudson Strategic Partners. Here's the deal. I see several issues with this staff referral. After reading the attached memo, there is the appearance that the city staff sat down with Northwestern folks and decided who would do the impact study. Why do I say this? Well, this group, Hudson Strategic Partners, prides themselves on doing impact studies for sports arenas in combination with entertainment districts. Well, why this is so stunning to me and startling is that there has been no vote taken yet to issue Northwestern a text amendment and commercial license. This makes this look really suspect to me. I'm counting on our elected officials to show the residents of Evanston that you actually care about our concerns and will not go the way of a no-bid contract that is also making no attempt to meet the city's MWBE requirements.
Thank you, Ms.
That's really interesting after Northwestern is like throwing that out, that this is going to be a big win for all of us.
Thank you.
Step back, seek other vendors that will be more community focused to bring the 7th Ward along with the rest of Evanston the impacts of just simply rebuilding the stadium.
If you could
None of
please
this
wrap
other
up.
fluff.
Please wrap up.
I will. Thank you.
Thank you.
David DiCarlo.
Thank you, Chair Kelly and council members. Before Northwestern erected the towers of Dyke Stadium in 1926, regular Evanstonians were already busy making the Central Street neighborhood below and really all of our cherished city into one of the greatest places to live. One of them was actually my wife's great-grandmother, a single mother who had moved to the area to raise her family and later worked in the cafeteria at Haven Middle School. My name's David DiCarlo, and I recently co-founded the Most Livable City Association with other community members. You already have our written comments on some problems that we have seen with the proposed study of Ryan Field by Hudson Strategic Partners. So I'd like to talk just a little bit about why our first campaign is focused on Northwestern's request to rezone the U2 University District. My wife and I moved to Evanston in 2018 to start our family, but as I mentioned, our connection goes back generations. You may wonder, from generation to generation, how have single and multifamily homes, a neighborhood business district, schools, a hospital continue to thrive alongside a towering collegiate football stadium? The answer is really Evanston zoning laws. Northwestern has been trying to transform its athletic facilities into commercial venues since at least the 1950s. But time and again, Evanston stood together and said no to those types of schemes because a nonprofit university shouldn't get richer at the expense of our city. Now Northwestern wants to spend $1 billion demolishing its old stadium to make way for a new Ryan Field. But don't let them take a wrecking ball to the zoning laws as well. The university touts the supposed trickle-down effects of professional sports, mega concerts, as reason enough to just let them use the new stadium however they want. But the way to get more revenue for the city isn't by granting Northwestern's request. It's creating a payment in lieu of taxes program and twisting their arm to finally hand over their fair share to the city. Since they just signed a Big Ten media deal worth up to $100 million a year, they can more than afford the new stadium and a little generosity towards their neighbors. More importantly, if your only concern was new revenue, I suppose long ago you would have privatized Dawes Park or sought a casino on Church Street, but you haven't. And perhaps that's because you believe, like Bobby Kennedy, in our community's less tangible assets, the health of our children, the quality of their education or the joy of their play, the beauty of our poetry or the strength of our marriages, the intelligence of our public debate or the integrity of our public officials. Everything, in short, which makes life worthwhile. Like many before, many of us moved here seeking a more livable city in which to put down roots or raise a family. And so we've put our faith in you, our city's leaders, to keep us oriented towards our North Star of creating the most livable city in America.
Thank you.
To carefully study any plans to take our city in a new direction and ultimately to reject any proposals that would put us on an uncharted and hazardous path. Thank you for your time this evening.
Thank you.
Mary Rosinski.
Hi. I want to say, David, that was probably one of the most beautiful public comments I've ever heard. So thank you. I want to follow up with that and say, we haven't decided we want an entertainment district in the middle of a residential neighborhood. And I was disturbed by the staff memo saying we possibly may hire Hunden Associates, his focus is on designing entertainment areas in blighted areas or downtown areas. What they do well. I'm not denying that. But we are in the middle of residential Evanston. It's not downtown where you may want to rejuvenate more and whatever. And I wouldn't suggest putting this in downtown Evanston either, even though on Northwestern's lakefront, they have 2 parking garages and a flat thing. But this is very disturbing that we would hire someone to validate Northwestern's studies. That's not the purpose. That's not what people ask for. We ask for a independent pro and con impact study because there is severe consequences for all the hundreds of families that live around there and the hundreds of thousands of dollars that have gone into their homes over the years. And that's some real money, and that's real tax dollar. If Northwestern can't afford to build their stadium without asking for all the neighbors in all of Evanston to help fund it by giving up zoning and giving up their quality of life, and to David's point, it is so much more than money. If that's what Evanston is going towards, only money, then I think that we have abdicated what is one of our core values. So I ask that you do not hire Hunden. Unless we are going to have a community meeting and decide we want an entertainment district smack in the middle of where Ryan Field is. Also, Northwestern, remember, is a $14 billion corporation. Nonprofit, non-tax paying. And I think we have to look and see what's going on and why we would be justifying them doing that. So that's all I wanted to say, other than please do support the Jens Jensen Gardens. When we had our first Jens Jensen Day back in 2018, we brought in 106 people, probably about 30 from other parts of the city. So it is a wonderful, wonderful project that's been going on, and the volunteers are growing every day. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.
Carlos Sutton.
Yes, good afternoon. I would like to agree with the previous speakers and their comments, but I would like to add, as a member of the marginalized community that has never had the opportunity to participate in these kinds of studies about the impact it would have on our community. And I'm very concerned that it seems like the staff seems to capitulate to whatever developers want, to the utmost disrespect for the members and the taxpayers of this city, not to mention the stakeholders who will be surrounding this edifice. So I wish that you would regroup and do not make approval of any study by Hunden Strategic Services. Send them back to where they came from, have an open meeting with the citizens and stakeholders of the city. Secondly, please vote approval for the Jens Jensen Garden. It is one of the greatest contributions Evanston has, and associated with the Harley Clark Mansion. And anything that you would do to maintain this and improve this will be an asset to not only that property, but to our entire community. Thank you. And stop disrespecting our citizens. You're not playing with monopoly money. You're playing with our taxpayers' money. Thank you.
Thank you.
Sonia Cohen?
Hi, I'm a 7th Ward resident, and I am here also to talk about the whole process for an independent analysis. It seems, again, like what many have said, Hunden is really focused more on real estate development and how an entertainment venue would work. What I think we need to have is an independent study that Tim referred to that has a true cost-benefit analysis to see what the results would be for that kind of, for an entertainment venue in a very residential neighborhood. Frankly, it seems like they're trying to shoehorn the city of Evanston into this with the promise of art fairs and community events. But what I also am concerned about is a March 27th meeting to look at the text amendment. You know, Northwestern just really announced this in September, that they want this entertainment venue. And I really hope we will slow down the process and we will take the time to understand the true impact to the 7th Ward and to the city of Evanston and what the cost is to Evanston. The other thing is, if it's a financial consideration, Northwestern has not only a lot of money, they own a lot of properties throughout Evanston. At least in the 2018 article I read in the Evanstonian, 113 houses, apartment buildings. Let's really look at all the money that Northwestern takes off the tax rolls. And instead of focusing on an entertainment venue, let's focus on contributions, sustainable, long-term contributions to the city, where the city and perhaps the schools can decide where the money should be best utilized for the city of Evanston. Thank you. And again, please slow the process down. Please look at other vendors. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bob Cruz? And then Aaron Cohen. I guess there's no one else then. Yeah, but I believe that was...
Hello, I also would like to comment that before we fast track a Hunden proposal, which, as others have stated, does focus on the potential upside of an entertainment venue, the role of the city is not to attempt to validate Northwestern's assumptions, which they so far are not transparent about. The role of the city council, I believe, is to determine what the impact and the cost will be to Evanston. A prospect for Northwestern of an entertainment venue might appear to be a tremendous opportunity from their perspective, but in fact potentially would impose tremendous costs to the city of Evanston. We currently subsidize Northwestern to the tune of between $25 and $35 million. Given that it's our largest corporation, got its tax-exempt status when it was essentially a one-room schoolhouse by the lake. It's not that anymore. So like others, I think it's imperative that we have a study moving forward that doesn't look at what a state-of-the-art venue could do for its developer, i.e. Northwestern, but what the impact will be for us taxpayers in Evanston. And again, if it's a matter of getting another few $1 million of revenue, how about that $25 to $35 million that our $16 billion corporation in this town potentially could pay. Thanks very much.
Thank you.
Last call for Bob Cruz. There's no one else. Bob Cruz, public comment. Bob Cruz, public comment.
He's there.
Good evening. I am not sure that you can hear me.
We can hear you, Bob.
Yes, hello, can you hear me?
We hear you.
Yes, I think you can hear me.
Yes.
All right.
We can hear
Yes.
you, Bob.
I just got notice that I was accepted for public comment. I'd like to just ask for. Good evening. I am not sure that you can hear me. Okay. Maybe I'll have. Sorry. I'll have to turn off. I think you can hear me. Well, I'm sorry. A little computer glitches here, but I'd like to comment on the Harley Clark and the Jens Jensen proposal and think that that's, I believe, a wonderful idea. I've worked with Charles in the past and the Jens Jensen group. We did some work in the greenhouse itself and around the property. We put in 300 or 400 square feet of a fence around a garden, a 400 square foot garden. And I know that Charles can do the work and he can lead the group well. And I just hope that you can find it among yourselves to agree that we should cooperate with him and make this happen. I'm sorry, a little choppy here. They bumped me up to the city council meeting and I just got notice of this event. So thank you.
Thank you.
That would conclude public comment.
Okay, great. We'll now move to, pardon me? Councilmember Reed?
I was going to move the consent agenda, minus items A9 and A7 and A8.
Okay, items A8, A7, and A9.
I'd also like to remove A1.
A1. I'd like to remove A5. And A11, okay. Okay, so I have items A1, A5, A7, A8, A9, and A11. Any other items?
I'm sorry, then I'm actually not going to remove item A7. So just on my end, item A8 and A9.
I'll keep A7 removed.
Okay, A7 remains, okay. Okay, so again, we have items A1, A5, A7, A8, A9, and A11. Any other items? Okay.
I will second the consent agenda, which now consists of items A2, 3, and 4, 6, and 10.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Any objections? Okay, the consent agenda passes minus those items mentioned. So that brings us to item A1. Would someone like to move item A1?
I'm going to recuse myself, so someone else.
I move approval of the City of Evanston payroll and bills list.
Second. Any discussion?
I'll recuse myself.
Okay. Okay, all in favor of item A1?
Aye.
Aye. I call for a roll call.
Councilmember Burns,
Yes.
Councilmember Reed,
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly,
Aye.
Councilmember Harris, Councilmember Newsma.
Abstain.
Okay, so the bills, item A1 passes with a vote of 4 in favor and 1 abstention. We now move to item A5.
I move item A5, approval of a construction contract for the rehabilitation of the Evanston Municipal Storage Facility, Phase 1.
Okay, Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I'm sorry, I didn't pull this off. Did somebody else pull this off, and I'll let them go first? Oh, Councilman, oh, okay. Well, I guess I think you should go first, Chair, and I'll respond.
I just have some questions about it. This is the, so if you could let us know how much of this cost is dedicated for the sheltering of the animals during construction.
Members of the committee, my name is Laura Biggs. I'm the city engineer. So of this cost, about $163,000, it's $163,473 is dedicated to the animal shelter, the temporary animal shelter costs.
And Councilmember Reed, go ahead.
Since it's since it was pulled off the consent agenda, and it was mentioned in public comment, I want us to remember that using the storage facility in this manner is actually a cost savings. It was mentioned that, you know, the investment that we're making for the animal shelter and for this to be now a storage facility is, you know, I think this is an $8 million cost savings roughly using this facility. Is that correct?
Yes. I don't remember the exact table we showed in that memo from September 27th, but where the city council directed us to retain the the recycling center and rename it the municipal storage center. But when we had looked at the cost of a public works storage building, we had looked around town for properties that were just available that were for sale, and none of them really met our needs. That was a multi-year effort that David Stoneback led. And then we looked at building a new one as part of the service center master plan. And that cost was going to be around $10 million, partially because we were locating it behind the sled hill at James Park in the public works storage area. And we don't really have any infrastructure that would support a building. Like, we'd have to take electricity back there, sewer, water, it was really intensive. And so by retaining the recycling center, renaming it our municipal storage center, we do have to invest in that. It's about $2,250,000, I believe, was the estimate for renovation. It's been out for sale on and off for the last 10 to 12 years, during which time the city did not invest in it. So overall, it was a sale of savings about $8 million to utilize it.
Yes, thank you for that. And so I think that's something to highlight here as we're going into this. This is a huge savings to the city. This makes sense. You know, there have been, in fact, maybe this is in the 8th ward of the storage facility, so my predecessor and previous councils, I think, were really rightfully so interested in looking at this property for to sell the property and to develop there. You know, that we thought about having Smiley Brothers there, but it didn't work out. And you know, I think when you ponder whether we should spend $10 million on a new facility or $2 million on an existing facility that we've had for decades, it makes sense to save the taxpayers' money. Even if you factor in you know, if we were to locate a private business on this site, the economic development, you know, over the lifetime of the building depending on what the use is, may not bring back the $8 million that we're going to save here in the long term. So I am fully in support of this, and I hope we can move forward with it.
Okay, great. Thank you. So this will be used for municipal storage?
Yes.
Okay, at some point after?
It's currently being used that way. We store various heavy equipment in there when it's in the off-season. A lot of times, things like plow blades have a lot of rubber fittings that are sensitive to UV light, so you can't just store them outside. We also store stone and sand that we use to complete excavations during the winter so that it's not frozen. So there's many other things that are stored there, but it's a variety of heavy equipment.
Okay, thank you. So it'll be converted, so we'll be moving equipment from some other, I mean, I'm trying to understand, so we're going to spend a lot of money to upgrade it in order for, I know for animals for part of the time, but I assume this is.
It's already being used that way. And the animals will take a relatively small portion of the building, maybe 30% at most. And, but the renovations, there are some renovations that are literally like putting in kennels and fixing the HVAC to match the air changes per hour you need to shelter animals. But there's some things like restoring the fire sprinkler system in the office area that are just things that will have to be done long-term. Fixing the foundation, where as part of this contract, we're modernizing the lighting that's needed for the animals, but also for the rest of the building to LED. So there's a variety of things that are being done that are just needed, even as we continue to use it for storage.
Thank you. Councilmember Newsma.
Thank you. I'm supportive as well. I just have some questions to clarify the budget and clarify the scope of the project.
Sure.
So as I understand it, the 717 something that we're approving tonight is for the entire phase one construction, not just design and engineering.
Yes.
So we've already done the design and engineering, and referring to some correspondence earlier this afternoon, we've done that significantly under budget.
The design and engineering, we did only for the phase one work, and we did quite a lot of that using our in-house architectural staff, contracting out the structural engineering and the mechanical, electrical, and plumbing improvement
Right.
design.
So it cost us $43,800 to do that design work, and we had originally kind of penciled in $105,000.
Yes.
So under budget there. So kudos to that. Kudos for that. And then the construction itself, the $717,000, is again less than what we had originally penciled in
Yes. Surprisingly, but yes.
by $300,000 or so.
A couple $100,000, but yeah.
So congratulations, number two.
Thank you.
On that.
I wish I could take credit for that.
Yeah. Total project cost was originally budgeted at $2.25 million. Are we?
2.25 is for all the renovation that's needed, not including the animal shelter improvements. And of that, we're spending $557,000, and we expected to spend between $700,000 and $800,000 of that $2.25 million.
So the savings we've been able to accrue so far, we can't take that off the overall cost?
Yes, we can. So we had sold the Central Street building that housed the North Branch Library. When the library is sort of separated off out of the city, for the most part, out of the city budget, the buildings, the ownership is retained by the city of Evanston because the city of Evanston paid the cost of debt service when we acquired the buildings. So that $900,000 was tentatively dedicated to the Public Works Storage Building, which turned out to be tremendously more than we anticipated. So the council settled on this conversation about how to just renovate our existing building. So of the $2.25 million, the first $900,000 is coming from the proceeds of the sale of the North Branch Library.
Okay. And then just in terms of project scope, looking at our CARP objectives, if you could just highlight what we're planning to do for the renovation here.
We are moving towards having an all-electric building. And to that end, we're also modernizing the LED. We are not addressing every HVAC system that we have in the building, but the ones we are addressing, we are modernizing to all electric. And we'll be looking at minor roof repairs and various other things. But yes, as we go forward, this building will be brought into compliance.
Thank you.
Great, thank you very much. Any other discussion, questions? Okay. So all in favor of item A5?
Aye.
Aye.
No objections? Okay, item A5 passes 5-0. We now move to item A8. I'm sorry, item A7.
I move item A7, approval of contract award, or approval of contract award to Reckon Specs LLC for property demolition services.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Nusma?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I would really rather deconstruct this building than demolish it. And I know that's been the subject of some discussion. Is somebody from staff able to speak to that, Paul? And I know that there's somebody from the legal department that was involved in the conversation as well.
Okay.
Which might be news to you.
Sure. Well, good evening, members of the APW committee. I'm Paul Zelmazak. I serve as the Economic Development Manager. What specific questions did you have about your preference to deconstruct, or what were?
So as I understand it, if the city owns the property and we're paying for demolition or deconstruction, either one of those would have to be at prevailing wage.
That is correct. That is a state, that's a state law.
Which makes the deconstruction cost even, exponentially that much more expensive.
Correct. Based on estimates that I worked with Ina Gutierrez from the Rebuilding Exchange. She provided estimates on deconstructing some of the houses on the property. It ends up being approximately 3.5 times the cost of the demolition. We knew that coming into this process. We knew that there was a prevailing wage requirement, and we knew that it was going to be more expensive. Our plan, our goal to before presenting this this request was we thought we were going to have we thought we were going to have a deconstruction proposal and a demolition proposal, and then to have the committee and the city council help us decide if we're going to go with the cheaper demolition option versus the deconstruction. Unfortunately, that option did not present itself because, well, frankly, the Rebuilding Exchange, which is maybe one of two firms that could do it, realized that the cost to do so would be really expensive because of that prevailing wage requirement. They decided not to propose on it, which left us with really Recon as the option. There was another choice, as explained last time, that unfortunately through our procurement process didn't meet the standards of a response, but that included a partnership with the Rebuilding Exchange where they were going to deconstruct the smaller barn structure that I believe is kind of like a coach house on the back of the building. Does that answer your question? Kind of.
It does, but I'm wondering if we have exhausted all possible options in examining the prevailing wage rule in the context of workforce development, and are there any exceptions or loopholes that we could legally avail ourselves of to have this deconstructed at a lower wage rate?
I would yield to my colleagues in the law department.
Thank you, Paul. Members of the committee, Alexandra Ruggie, Deputy City Attorney. The City of Evanston Law Department did look at this. As Paul mentioned, the Prevailing Wage Act is state law. So anytime a project is utilizing city funds, state funds, they have to follow the prevailing wage. And if the work being done is being done by a laborer, say, we have to use that prevailing wage for the laborer. There aren't any exceptions.
Even in the context of a workforce development, training project, apprenticeship, something like that?
Correct. It's still a laborer under the Act.
Okay. I'm not at all recommending we do anything contrary to state law. which leaves us, as I understand it, with only one option if we want to have this deconstructed at a reasonable cost, which would be to not do it now on the city's expense, but package it in to an RFP, and once we have sold the project to a developer, to require them to do the deconstruction.
Yes, council member, that was an alternative that I laid out in the memo. I would say, as a staff member advising the city council and the committee, that that is an option, but that also will delay. It will seriously delay the demolition or deconstruction, literally because we're waiting to do the procurement process. And then the sale of the property plus the zoning to approve the project.
Yeah, so we're sitting there for another year, 12 months, 10, 12 months.
Without exaggerating, correct.
Yeah,
so that's a long time for the community to be.
In which case, I would kind of defer to the council member in whose ward this project sits, and Councilmember Burns, if you'd like to offer your input.
Councilmember Burns?
Yeah, and I've been talking to Ina Gutierrez from the Rebuilding Exchange, who spoke before council and expressed her concerns, which was the reason for this item being referred back to APW. I think we've actually come to an agreement on a good path forward. Before I get into that, I will say that I think this is a unique case. In I think most other cases, there wouldn't be this urgency to demo right away. It just so happens that this property has been kind of vacant in this condition for, I don't know if you know, Paul, how long, but far too long. And so to put another year, 18 months on top of that, I think it's something that the community members, especially those who live across the alley, across the street from it, wouldn't want to tolerate, and for good reason. But I think in many other cases, we could do exactly what Paul proposed, which is just package it all into an RFP process and put it as a requirement, in the RFP that we want developers to respond to it, and we want, a certain portion of the demo to be deconstructed versus demo. I think, again, 9 out of 10 times we'll be able to do that. This one is rather unique. I think what we decided on, I think, with this committee support is amending the contract to exclude the barn, and that Ina and her team, Rebuilding Exchange, have said that they are willing to donate their services to deconstruct the barn, which is really, out of all the properties, what they feel is the most valuable in terms of salvageable materials. We've already heard from Council Cummins, I believe. I talked to him prior to this meeting, and it would not trigger the prevailing wage issue that we've been discussing because it's being donated, and no public funds will be going towards its removal. So happy to discuss this more, but Ina is satisfied with that. It'll allow us to still get some trainees involved and to deconstruct and salvage a really important part of the property. So that's the amendment I'll make when we're ready.
Thank you, Mr. Zalmazek. Any other questions? I'm sorry. Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, I am fully, I agree with Councilmember Nusma. This is where I grew up. These are one of the properties in my childhood home. I would love to see the building deconstructed, and I would love to go into Rebuilding Warehouse and buy a chunk of wood and put it in a future home. But I agree with Councilmember Burns. I mean, seeing with his forthcoming motion, happy to support it. The issue with prevailing wage in this scenario is unfortunate, and we discussed this recently at the MWEBE committee, and I think that what this body may have to do so we don't miss out on opportunities like this in the future is go to our state legislators and ask for a sensible revision to this law to allow for a situation like this where a nonprofit job training entity is using city funds to deconstruct a building, which meets our CARP goals, meets our I don't need to explain it to everyone here, but yeah, we need to take action, and I think maybe we can pass a resolution to ask our local legislators to take action at the state level. But certainly, in the interim, what we can do, certainly happy to support Councilmember Burns's motion. Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma?
I had a similar conversation with Ina about the necessity of action at the state level, so we can follow up on that. Whether or not we need a resolution from the council, we do have a friendly state representative or two in this neighborhood, so. So
Okay.
is Councilmember Burns going to make a motion
Yeah,
right
and
now?
I don't know what we need to do with RECON, but certainly the motion is just to remove the what has been referred to as the barn from the overall scope of work for this contract, and to work out an agreement with Rebuild and Exchange to either to deconstruct the barn at no cost to the city. Yeah.
Second.
I was wondering if legal could weigh in on whether or not we can award a contract, amending the contract requirements without having prior discussion with the contractor that we are proposing to award to.
Just when I was about to walk out. Good evening, members of the AMPW Committee, Chair Kelly, Nicholas Cummings Corporation Counsel. I don't know that I can answer that question right now. This was pursuant to a request for proposals, my understanding. So the city essentially would be amending the requirements pursuant to that RFP in order to change or amend this particular contract. We would probably need to either open it back up for bid or talk to the developer who we are already intending to award the contract at the very least. But I don't know I don't have that answer right now.
Thank you.
Sounds like it might be appropriate to hold this until we answer that question. So I'll make.
Yeah, that's fine. There's something about it that doesn't sound quite right, but because we could just vote no and then they don't get it and then give it to there's something about that doesn't sound right. But I'm fine holding it, and if that's the opinion of our legal department.
Does that sound like the prudent course of action here?
Mr. Stonebeck?
I would recommend that you do hold it to give us the opportunity to discuss with the company that we are proposing to award to and make sure that there's a reduction in their proposed price rather than saying, yeah, you can deconstruct it now. My price remains the same. Council could still elect to do that. We just want to give you the knowledge of what the revision would be.
I'll move to hold this.
Yeah, that's fine. I think I think if we went back to them and said, this is no longer part of the scope of work, can you give us a new, they would do that whether we held it or not, right? They just want to perform the work and get paid for the work that they do. But I'm fine holding it. I just don't think it would be an issue if we went to them and said, hey, we voted to remove the barn. What is the new cost of the, how much would that cost us? But it's fine. We can hold it to the next meeting. I probably want to, it probably doesn't matter.
Excuse me, Councilmember Burns, I didn't mean to
No, go ahead.
interrupt. Okay. The only alternative, I need some direction from Deputy City Manager Stonebeck. I could literally call the contractor between now and the city council meeting to have him file an email with the actual number and come back to the city council with an update, or we hold it for it will be 3 weeks because the next meeting is the 13th, I believe, of February. So I'll follow any direction.
We can still hold it at
on the
council.
spot to answer within half an hour. So let's hold it. We've
Okay.
got time to sort it out. Nobody's stressed out. So I will make that motion to hold it.
Point of
Okay,
order.
Councilmember Reed?
A motion to hold is not proper in committee. A motion to table.
A motion to table until our next meeting.
Which requires a vote, which is different than a hold.
Okay, so it's been moved to table until, it doesn't have, till our next meeting, which I believe is February 13th, and it's been seconded by Councilmember Harris. So that requires a vote, and Mr. Stonebeck, if you would take the roll.
Yes. 1 second, please. I just want to start the right order. Councilmember Burns?
No.
Councilmember Reed?
No.
Councilmember Harris. Aye. Councilmember Nusma.
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly.
Aye. Okay, so it passes with a vote of 3-2. It's tabled until February 13th.
That bring, nope.
A lot more to go. A8, A9.
Right. So we now move to item A8.
Madam Chair, I'll move item A8, approval of the sole source contract with Hunden Strategic Partners to provide a Ryan Field economic impact study.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded. Councilmember Ravel?
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and members of the committee, Eleanor Ravel, 7th Ward Council member, and I have some comments about this proposed item. First of all, I want to talk first about the cover memo and make it very clear that our intent is not to validate the university's claims that profits from an unspecified number of concerts or special events is needed. That the idea is not to look at what the economic impact study was done for the university and decide whether we agree with it or not, but rather to do our own independent analysis of what we think, what we can count on as the economic impact of both the proposed rebuild of the stadium and especially the issue of the concerts. So, and more specifically, I guess, I envision and would basically go back to Hunden and say we want to look at 3 different aspects of the proposal. First, I really want to see what's going to be the impact during demolition and construction, because there's a lot of talk about potential jobs and both temporary and potentially permanent jobs if people get the training during the construction itself. And so in that area, and then what kind of permit fees would come to the city, so that could be a clear economic impact for the city. Then secondly, just looking at the home football games, there's a lot of talk about how this amazing new stadium is going to provide this enhanced fan experience, and so people who might not have wanted to come to the football game are going to want to come because it's going to be so amazing. And so I'd like to know what the expectation is of current revenues from the home football games compared to what they might be able to expect with this enhanced venue. And then third, and most important, is separately, what will the impact be of these proposed concerts over and above the football games? So what will be the impact for city revenues? What kind of extra new tax revenues can we expect? For the downtown and for each of our neighborhood business districts, and particularly the Central Street Business District, what can we expect would be the economic impact for them? You know, restaurants, hotels, retail sales, et cetera. And for our residents in terms of jobs, because I think, you know, potentially there are some new jobs that would be available with the concerts, but are those all going to be temporary or low-paying jobs? What can we expect there? So that would be for the broader community. And then in particular, what can we expect would be the impact for the immediate neighbors around the stadium? And I really want to make sure that our consultant understands the real special location of this stadium rebuild project. Ryan Field, as you've heard earlier this evening from some comments from the residents, it's located in the heart of a well-established, dense residential neighborhood. And as far as I know, it's unlike the setting for any other Big Ten or even a professional football stadium. So I don't believe that there's a comparable stadium project that the consultant can look at to say, here's what we can expect in Evanston. So it's going to take someone with Hunden's experience at analyzing impact of things like concerts to be able to give us these answers. I do believe that Hunden Strategic Partners does have the expertise and experience that's required to give us a sound economic analysis. But I ask the committee to table this, table the contract to allow us time to revise the proposed scope of work so it's very clear what we're asking for and what Hunden is expected to deliver. And so I'd ask that you table this to your next ANPW meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Ravel. Councilmember Reed?
Thank you. I really appreciate, Councilmember Ravel, your thoughtful list of questions that need to be answered and added to the contract, your willingness to table this. So I support that tabling, and I guess in the interest of time, I will make that motion to table this to our next meeting.
I'll say. I'll third.
Great. So tabling and second, can we have a discussion after it's, before a vote?
Yes,
I mean, I
the
support
motion
it.
to table is, yeah.
Okay, I wonder if we could also consider, I have no doubt that Hunden is a top-notch firm for this, but there are some groups like Civic Economics that's very community focused, in conjunction with community allies. If we could look at perhaps Civic Economics also between now and then. Because I'm not entirely clear, this was an informal process, and why didn't we RFP? I'm just wanted to understand the process. And would the other firms that were like Friedman, SP Friedman, AECOM, would they also have required an MWEBE waiver?
Thank you, Committee Chair. Once again, Paul Zalmazak, Economic Development Manager. So frankly, in the interest of time, meaning we wanted to move quickly in responding kind of at the university's pace, we identified 3 firms that are relatively local that kind of have an economics consulting expertise, and those are the 3 firms we identified. Hunden kind of rose to the top because they do focus on stadiums and they serve on both sides of the table, meaning they do have city clients. They're not necessarily saying when they do an analysis that they are pro stadium. They're highlighting the impacts that a stadium provides based on their location. This is not a pro stadium firm. It's a firm that understands stadium economics, which includes concert economics, sports economics, et cetera. So that's why we proceeded with that firm. None of the 3 firms that we identified are minority or women-led. It is a real challenge in the urban planning and economic consulting industry to find firms that are led by people of color. It's unfortunate.
Right, thank you. Okay. So I think that answered my question. I would just ask if you would consider, Mr. Zalmazak, looking at civic economics?
I will commit to setting up a meeting with them to discuss.
Thank you. So this has been tabled and moved to table and seconded until our
February 13th.
February 13th. And all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
No objections? Okay, that passes.
Sure.
We now,
I will move item A9. But what I'm going to move is to direct staff to finalize a lease with the Jens Jensen Garden Evanston Group and bring that back, final lease back to this committee to then be moved forward to council.
and I'll second that.
My blinky light isn't blinking, it looks like, but go ahead, Councilmember
Yes.
Reed, and I'll get in line.
Okay. You know, I support moving forward with this to have staff negotiate a final lease and bring that back to committee. I've spoken with a number of folks today, and so I just want to briefly lay out a few questions. So one of the questions is that I think will have to be worked out in the negotiation is, you know, that I've heard from some of my colleagues is, you know, why is the term of the lease 40 years? And, you know, I had a similar question, and I think if I can have, I don't know, maybe first our law department or the Jens Jensen Group explain that the reason you need a 40-year lease is because you want to make sure that when you're planting, or if you want to explain why a 40-year lease is necessary. You wanted to come to the microphone, and if you can take just about a minute or 30 seconds.
I think it's necessary and appropriate, given the long-term time that it takes for a landscape design to develop. We're talking about planting trees that have a lifespan of a couple hundred years, and we're investing not just in the immediate grounds, but whatever we do impacts the whole neighborhood. And of course, a lot of dreams and go along with the people that are donating the money, and they understand the long-term nature of what we're doing. Right now, the landscape features there from Jens Jensen are almost 100 years old. The oak trees that are behind the building are a couple hundred, well over 200 years old, and those trees were mature oak trees when the original was done. So if you look at the great, beautiful parks that we have, like Centennial Park with all the mature oak trees, in order to achieve that, it takes well over 40 years. So, that's
thank you for that explanation, because I when colleagues raised that, I shared. I thought, why 40 years? And so that explanation makes a lot of sense to me. It's to ensure that the group has enough time to ensure that the landscape is fully developed and that the donors' vision comes true. Then I've also spoken to folks who, again, reasonably say maybe we should just take a breath and see what's out there, potentially go back out for a full RFP with the grounds and the building. And again, I think that's reasonable. But then when you think about it and when you look at the proposals that we have had in the past, I think, as someone stated earlier during public comment, that turning the gardens over to this group to this group will ensure that it's almost like staging the house for someone else. And I can't imagine, just similar to Artist Book House, how many organizations want to both make a major investment in the house and invest in the grounds and ensure that the grounds are maintained to the standard that I believe a wide section of the community expects long into the future. And so I think that actually does help us get action on the next step with the house, whatever that may be. And then, lastly, does this close the door to, entering into an agreement with the Jens Jensen Garden Evanston Group? Does it close the door to, again, flexibility with whoever the future tenant or whatever we decide to do with the house? Does it close the door to opportunities there, such as Artist Book House wanted to create a stone terrace for accessibility and for to allow a cafe there? Would this close the door to someone being able to do that? And I think what I've heard expressed from the Jens Jensen Garden Evanston Group and what I expect to see in the lease is that we have the ability to ensure that that the doors aren't closed in the future. So with that, I think I ask that we support moving this forward and negotiate a lease and have that lease come back to this body and then move forward to council with a final lease at our February 13th meeting. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Councilmember Nusma?
Can you try blinking my light over there to see if it resets? Do you mind? Okay, there we go. We're back in business. But thank you, Madam Chair. As much as I appreciate the work that the Jens Jensen Group has done over the years, I don't think it's prudent to take this action that's in front of us tonight. This assumes we want to go ahead and bifurcate the lease, which 2 weeks ago was the prudent course of action, given where we were at with regards to the Artist Book House partnership. But it's been less than 14 days since Artist Book House has dematerialized. We still haven't negotiated the termination of that lease, and I am in the camp that believes we should take a minute, take a breath, and make sure we are appropriately considering all of our options before we move forward. One question we'll have to answer is, do we want to bifurcate the lease and lease the house and the gardens separately? Maybe we do. If we do, Jens Jensen has as good of a shot as any group to get the lease on the gardens. And so I'm basing my opinion this evening not on any negative feelings or negative judgment with regards to Jens Jensen, but the bigger picture is we have at the City Council have to be responsible for the whole package, the house and the grounds. The house is the much more economically impactful portion of that package, and that's what we have to focus on. And I don't want to preclude a potential future participant in this project from bidding on the project or participating in some way, shape, or form by forcing them to work with a partner that already exists. I want to make sure we are approaching this kind of strategically and thoughtfully. If in the end it works out to work with Jens Jensen, that would please me greatly. But I don't think it's appropriate to jump to that conclusion this evening.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris?
Good evening. I see on the other hand, I do want the lease to be fleshed out. We do have to get out of the lease that we currently have. But I do want it to go to Jens Jensen. I was one of the people who were worried about a 40-year lease. That's I'm a little older than that, but we won't necessarily be around to see the fruits of that labor. But understanding some of what you said makes sense. But I just want us to be prudent, to make sure we're appropriate with our leases, the time ramifications and things of that nature. But I would not like to reopen it for someone else to come in. I do want to be committed to Jens Jensen. I just want that to be appropriately done. As stated last week, I want us to do everything proper and in order. So, thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris. Councilmember Reed?
Yeah, so I think we have the votes here, and I think staff, has proper direction. I spoke with Council Cummings just to make sure, Councilmember Harris, your concerns are answered. Council Cummings offered 2 suggestions on how we move forward with this. This was one of the suggestions that we make this motion, and I think that's appropriate, and so I appreciate that we're committed to Jens. Attorney Ruggie.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. Just to clarify, so the City of Evanston City Code specifies how we can sell or lease our city property. This needs to be done by ordinance. Mm-hmm. So I would just suggest legally that you amend the motion to
mirror, it's 114.7. Let me double check.
117.4.
117.4. Yes, got my dyslexic numbers mixed up there. All right. So
and then also just another question. Technically, the lease with Artist Bookhouse has not been formally terminated. So is it the direction of this committee to terminate it from the city side? Are you directing us to wait for official termination? I just legally worry about entering into a lease when we're still under lease with someone else.
We haven't directed anything yet.
I do believe that, one, they've indicated that they are through here, and certainly we had the option to end the lease previously because the terms were not met. That's why we were amending it. Councilman Revelle is at the podium, so I'll let you speak.
Well, just to let you know where the letter or what Artist Bookhouse is doing. Artist Bookhouse is preparing a formal letter to terminate the lease. They have quite a few. They have a lot of books in the house now left over from their book sale and some furniture. So they're in the process of moving that the books and that furniture out. And so they're, in terms of timing, I think they would like to get the house cleaned out before they actually formally send the letter in. So, I mean, they're working to make that happen soon, but it's not happening tomorrow.
Thank you. Councilmember Harris?
Thank you for that information, but I do think we need to work together so that this does not drag on and on. So I think we need to work with them to decide a date. Usually when somebody's leaving, there's a set date. They don't set the date. The owner set the date. So I'd like for us to come up with something that makes sense so it doesn't drag on, so that we can now work with the garden. So I don't know what that date is, but it's not going to be in perpetuity. We're not going to just wait.
How about February 13th?
Well, so quickly, Councilmember Harris, just so you know, the current lease, once Artist Bookhouse terminates, they only have 24 hours to remove their belongings per the lease. So I think that's why they were waiting to give official termination. And then as far as an ordinance for the lease of the property, the survey and the legal description would not be ready by the 13th, so staff would be seeking additional time beyond that.
Again, as long as we have something in mind to not just say, well, when we move and we don't have a place to move, we have business to take care of. I want us to be steady and move forward. I do want us to be appropriate as a city to not just say 24 hours, it's 23, we're waiting for you to leave. But we need to set that tone and that cadence.
Thank you, Councilmember Harris.
And I just want to clarify my motion then before we take a vote. To be clear that, this would move in accordance with 117.4, which, to remind folks, requires a two-thirds vote for a lease over 20 years. So that will be the case. And then also to ensure that we are giving Artist Bookhouse enough time to clear out and terminate the lease. I do think 3 weeks is, I did a walkthrough with them. There's not a whole lot. They're not living there, so I think they can get out and move all of their belongings out within 3 weeks, and then we can certainly provide enough time for. And I guess the 3-week deadline is kind of irrelevant now because the legal department will need more time to get the proper legal definition. So, do you think the second meeting in February seems reasonable enough?
We can definitely try.
Okay. So then, I'll move that we have this for the second meeting in February, follow 117.4, and we set the tone, as Councilmember Harris said, with Artist Bookhouse to move at a responsible pace.
Councilmember Harris?
Sorry to keep being on the mic. So do we give direction to Jens Jensen Garden to keep moving forward? I want them to leave with some understanding of who they are and where they are in this process. So I don't want us to just say, we're going to wait. So
I think that the direction is that staff will be negotiating with them between now and the next time this appears here. And so they, that you're in the midst of negotiation. We'll come back with a final lease, and then that'll move on to the full council.
Okay. I just wanted to be clear that you understand to continue business as usual.
Well, it moves on to the full council tonight, too.
That's not my motion, is to not move this on to the full council, to direct staff, the city manager, and the legal department to enter negotiations. This will not appear on the council agenda.
Thank you for if I may, Madam Chair, thank you for clarifying that motion. Again, I don't think that's a prudent use of our time and city's resources. I would like to have a conversation at council tonight because if this does require a 2/3 vote and we don't have that vote at council, I don't want to ask staff to spend that time, and I don't want to waste Jens Jensen time going down that path if it's ultimately going to lead nowhere.
Okay, if I may, part of what we're asking is that a finalized lease, most of this has been done. I don't want us discussing, I think none of us want us looking over what we currently have. It's the, the language of the lease. We'd much prefer that this get finalized. Most of the work has, been done, so that's, I think, what we'd like to see. And I think I also would very much, obviously, like to see Jens Jensen Garden continue the beautiful work they've been doing. Historically, these have been separate entities. The gardens are historical, the house is separate. So either way, I think many of us would like to see this continue, but this will be, once the lease is finalized, it'll come back here again for further discussion. So I think I agree with Councilmember Harris that we should move forward at this point. Thank you. Councilmember Reed?
To be fair, for the record, what Councilmember Newsom was asking was the second suggestion of Council Cummings. I do support this route. I think that having a final lease will help folks really understand what we're getting into and what the deal is. And there's 5 of us here. I suspect 4 of us right now. I don't want to assume anybody's vote, but I suspect 4 of us are going to support this. I think convincing 2 other members that this is the right thing to do is not a huge hurdle. So thank you.
Mr. Stonebeck?
Staff would greatly appreciate to have one final motion so that we can understand that that's part of what our challenge was with preparing the minutes from the last meeting, is that there was motions, there was discussion, there was revision to the motion. It's not in writing. It's very challenging for staff to even go back and watch the video to determine what the actual motion is. I can't tell when I get the impression you want the city to terminate the lease with Artist Bookhouse. I wasn't sure what date you wanted that by.
Thank you. Yeah,
If we could get the motion in
yes.
writing, that would be spectacular.
I can,
Because we just don't understand following them.
I can reduce the writing, or the motion to writing, but to reiterate it here for the floor so we can continue, is that I move that we move forward with, we instruct the city manager to move forward with negotiating a lease for the grounds in the coach house with the Jens Jensen Garden Evanston Group, following our city code, which is mandatory already, but 117.4, and that we set a deadline for Artist Bookhouse that I think I can leave up to the city manager and his staff to set a deadline that allows us to negotiate this lease and bring it back in a timely fashion. I don't think I have to dictate the exact date here. And then lastly, I believe the instruction was to give enough time for staff to conduct the survey, and so that's why we're asking for this to come back at the second meeting in February.
Thank you, Councilmember Reed. Okay, that could.
Does that help, Deputy City Manager?
Is this a motion to table until February 27th?
Councilmember Reed gets to make that call.
You know, I don't know if there's a huge difference. So it's a whatever you see fit. I mean, as long as what I just said gets done, that's the important thing.
It's just like with the Northwestern, I think it's tabling, right?
So yes, it's
Table.
a motion to table.
No, okay.
Well, it's a motion to table, and we're
But it's
getting
to
it done.
come back, we're clear to, with a
Yes,
final,
it's
with a
coming back to this,
finalized lease?
yes.
Okay. Okay. We have a second, we have a motion and seconded. Can we? Right, the motion had already been seconded to have direct staff to bring back a finalized lease that's in agreement with Jens Jensen Gardens and conforming to legal, City of Evanston legal, and to bring it back by to shoot for the second week in February.
Correct.
Right? And with
I
that.
just think the motion was already made, and so
It was in second by
we're going to have like
Councilmember
two
Kelly.
different people seconding.
So let's retract.
So
I don't want it to
clean it up.
happen, so I'm not going to offer any advice on how to get it done.
Yeah, I mean, it was motioned and seconded by Councilmember Harris both times. So.
Okay, so let's call the, would you take a roll?
You can do a voice vote unless someone requests otherwise.
Okay, so.
Well, hold on one second. I just want to make sure, again, I'm going to always stick with, are we proper and in order? If our deputy chief is saying no, then I
Well,
want us to step back and be clear what we're doing, and so that we're not going back and forth. So, are we clear? If I didn't second the first time and the second, let's get it right.
We got to retract the first
Yes,
motion.
okay, I retract my motion. I just want to make sure, because we're giving the direction really to Luke and to legal, and so I just want to make sure Luke and legal are are understanding what we're asking here. Yes, okay, so, and I'm going to put this in fact, can I ask that we stand at ease for 3 minutes as I put this in writing?
Certainly, 3 minutes to put in writing, thank you.
Not yet, but I've got it written, and I'm sending it in this moment. But I mean, the real thing is for Luke and staff to have it. Well, I mean, we all know what we're voting. I think we all know what we're voting on. All right. Well, I was going to read it out loud as well, but all right. Yeah, do you want to call the meeting to order, Chair?
I'm calling the meeting back to order. So, okay, Councilmember Reed, will you please read the motion?
Yes, I move the Administration and Public Works Committee direct staff to return a finalized lease to our second meeting in February for the grounds and coach house adjacent to the city-owned property commonly known as the Harley Clark Mansion, and to execute that lease with the Jens Jensen Garden Group, Evanston.
I'll second. Okay.
It is coming in 30 seconds, but that's the exact language there. You can.
All right, I'm going to, let's, Mr. Stonebeck, if you could please call the vote, the roll. Oh, I apologize.
Yeah.
Councilmember Harris?
Councilmember Burns?
Aye.
Councilmember Reed?
Aye.
Councilmember Kelly?
Aye.
Councilmember Harris? Councilmember Nusma?
Okay, the motion passes with a vote of 4-1. This is, okay, I think that's it. And I think we're going to move now to table the discussion items. Do we have one? Oh, we still have
We
item.
have all the items.
Consideration.
We now move on to item A11.
Madam Chair, I move item A11, Resolution 3R23, authorizing the city manager to enter a parking lease agreement with Zoe Life Evanston Labs owner at the city garage located at 525 Church Street.
I'm sorry, A12.
Oh, sorry.
I thought it was
A12.
A11. A11.
I'm
item
sorry,
A11.
I'm overexcited and want to get through this, so. I will move item A11, approval of change order number 1 to the agreement with McGuire, Igleski and Associates, et cetera, et cetera.
Second.
I'm sorry, was A11 removed?
Yes, I did.
Okay, okay.
Councilmember Harris.
I was just trying to understand what caused the change order. That was it. I just want to understand the difference.
Chair Kelly, members of the committee, Darrell King, Water Production Bureau Chief. So when the proposals originally, the scope of work originally went out to several consultants, bidding and engineering services, no, construction and bidding services were not included. MIA, however, when they submitted their proposal, they included it along with everybody else that didn't. At the time, we didn't include it because we were trying to keep costs down as well. As the work progressed and the performance that they did, we decided that it would be a good idea based on the pricing that they submitted, and we had them update their pricing. The workload to staff, that we continue on with the original scope that they gave us that included bidding and construction services. So we're just coming back with it now, the 7,500 that they originally proposed, and now we're performing this change order and including it along with the full scope of work.
So, can I continue?
Yes,
Okay.
Councilmember
So would
Harris.
that have, with the other people that didn't bid, did we save? Have we lost? Have we broken even? Would that have changed the bid had we?
It
done-
wouldn't have.
Okay.
Because the original proposals did not include the original 7,500. MIA was the lowest proposal that was submitted,
Even with the 75?
even with the 7,500.
Okay, thank you. I'm good, thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. King. Okay, thank you. With that, any further discussion, questions? Okay, thank you very much. All in favor of item A11?
Aye.
No opposed? Okay, Mr. Councilmember Reed? Okay, item A11 passes 5-0. We now move to,
Items for consideration. Chair, if I may, move items without objection, items A12, A13, A14, A15, and A16.
I will second items A12, 13, 14, 15, and 16 to be moved simultaneously. Is there
Okay.
any discussion?
any discussion, questions?
Just on one of these items, I just want, and this will go to council as well. I don't know if it's going to be pulled off consent, but we are voting on the police contract, and I think for our officers and for city staff across the board, this is long overdue. The Baker Tilly study showed that our police officers were underpaid when compared to comparable municipalities, and particularly given the complexities of a city like Evanston that's focused on equity, focused on accountability, focused on reimagining policing. I think this is a good step in doing right by our law enforcement, and so I'm happy to vote for this package of raises.
Great, okay. No further discussion. All in favor of those items?
Aye.
Okay, no opposed? Okay, so items A12 through A16 pass 5-0. Okay, so I would like, go ahead.
With that, I will move that we table the items D1 and D2 to our next meeting. Is that appropriate?
Yes. Is that all right? Till our next meeting. Good.
Okay. Okay, that's items D1 and D2. So without objection, I table.
No
those.
objections, those are tabled until our next meeting.
All right.
Okay. Okay, with that, do we have to vote on that? Everyone's okay with that? Aye? Okay. All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I think, did we get a second on that? We got a second? Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, so those items have been postponed or held over to the next meeting. With that, our meeting is adjourned, and we'll begin, absolutely, Councilmember Harris, I apologize.
It's okay, I just pushed my button. So I just want to say thank you to Councilmember Kelly for her service on this committee. It looks like I will be chairing the next upcoming meeting, and I'm kind of looking forward to that. Thank you, but thank you for your service.
Thank you. Okay, the meeting is adjourned. We'll start P&D at 7.
3 minutes.
I'm
How about
sorry?
Now.
How about immediately, as soon as
Right
we
now.
can convene a
Okay.
quorum, because this is going to be quick.
Okay, so we'll begin right away with P&D.